begin this look, I'm going to be using my own hand to map out where the bruising is going to go. To do this, I'm using a light brown face paint and I'm painting that onto my hand on the raised areas of my hand, and then I'm gently wrapping my hand around my neck to make a handprint. We're going to work from this to make the bruising. Now with a stiff bristled brush, I'm gently dabbing on some quite dry actually red face paint, just so that it's like a dry brush effect, and then I'm also tapping that out if it gets a bit too bright. We just want to keep it nice and subtle and diffused for now. Now I'm using a dark purple face paint to go over the same areas, slightly smaller area, and then tapping it out as and when necessary. I just want this to be a little bit more concentrated in the middle of the bruising. Now to blend everything in and mute it down a little bit so it looks like it's within the skin, I'm adding a little bit of pressed powder over the top. Make sure the face paint is nice and dry before you do this. You don't want to smear anything, we just need a nice light layer to make it look nice and blended in together. Now around the very edges of each bruised section, I'm adding a tiny bit of yellow face paint, just a really tiny amount. This is a fresh bruise, so we don't want a lot of yellow. But even a very recent bruise will have a touch of yellow in it, so we definitely want it there. Now right in the middle of every bruised section, you want a tiny little bit of black face paint and tap it out with your finger so that it's not too harsh. Be sure to only put the black in the very centres and tap it out really well, otherwise the bruise is going to end up looking way too dark and all of your previous work will be covered up, and we don't want that. If you go too crazy with the dark colours, just wipe off your brush, make sure it's nice and clean, and then with a tiny bit of water dab that on and tap it out with your finger again, and that should correct your problem. You might need to go in with the red again though. When you're happy with your basic bruising, you might want to add a little bit of irritation with some red face paint around the area and then go back in with your pressed powder to blend everything out again. This gives the illusion that the bruise is underneath the skin, which is obviously what we want. Now I'm going in with some red eyeshadow to really emphasise the irritation around the edges of the bruises. And now I'm going in with some dark purple eyeshadow just to really emphasise the depth of the bruise and make it look really fresh and as if the blood is pooling underneath, which after all is what a bruise is. Just one quick tip though, when using eyeshadows, always use matte eyeshadows. If you use a shimmery one, it's going to look a bit weird unless you're going for a bruise on maybe a Twilight vampire or a fairy, then you shimmer away. If you get any eyeshadow fallout, just brush that away with a dry brush. As long as you're gentle, it shouldn't leave any marks. I feel like bruises are all about layering, so the more layers you do of like the deeper shades, then the more fresh and the more severe the bruise will look. Again, you can add to that irritation around the chest area with eyeshadows as well. And now we're moving on to some broken capillary veins around the handprint, and for this I'm using a dark red face paint, or you can use red with a tiny little dot of black mixed in. And for this I'm using a fine brush, and again if it goes a little bit too wide or a little bit too bright, just tap it out with your finger while it's still wet. Okay, so that's our bruise done, but I'm pretty sure if someone had choked you to death, your makeup would not still be perfect. So we're going to mess that up now. So I've just randomly smeared my lipstick away, and then I'm using this cream blush to add some puffiness and swelling around my eyes and blending it out. I'm then going to add a little bit of the Bruisey purpley red face paint around the inner corners just to give those eye bags some real emphasis. Not like they need it, but you know. And then I'm just taking some black face paint and putting that along my lower lash line as if lining my lower lash line, and then I'm going to add some water and make that drip down my face to look like tears. You can control where the tears fall by tilting your head in a certain way, and then when you've got the drips to where you want them, just take a dry brush and soak up the very end of like the bead of the tear, and that will keep them from running any further. I'm adding a bit of that red eyeshadow around the sockets of my eyes, again to give that effect of irritation and pressure behind the eyes, and then I'm going in with a little bit of that purple and red eyeshadow around the lips, because your lips do change colour when you can't breathe. And I'm doing some more broken capillary veins around the mouth and the nose too. So I'm doing these in exactly the same way as I did around the handprint bruise. So with a very fine brush, some red face paint, and then tap it out if it gets too bold. Now using some fake blood, I'm applying this to each nostril, a little bit around the corners of my eyes and also the corners of my mouth. And this is the finished look. Thanks so much for watching, guys, I really appreciate it. This was actually a collaboration on Instagram with a ton of other artists, so please go to my Instagram to check that out. And while you're here, why not check out some more of my videos? Just click the picture and it'll take you straight there. See you in a bit.